All right.
All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Swiftly Built. Sorry about last night. We had some technical difficulties related to the streaming software that I've been trying to use, but it appears to be more cooperative tonight. I'd like to first welcome Charlie Chapman to the stream. He's a iOS developer and makes the great app Dark Noise. Welcome, Charlie.
Thanks for having me. This is my first time doing anything live, so we'll see how that goes.
All right. Could be the beginning of an illustrious career or very short-lived. Awesome. So what we thought we'd do is just kind of chat about WWDC and what we've seen so far. Maybe if there's stuff from today that is of particular interest, we could give that a go. But otherwise, just kind of chat about all of the amazing things that we now get to play with and spend the summer working with. What have been some of your highlights?
So at least on the developer side of things, widget kit and the new Siri kit stuff. Specifically with media intents are the things that I've really dove into and actually gotten into the code on so far.
Yeah, nice. Related to your app, I'm assuming.
Yeah. Basically, if I'm watching a session and I can immediately see a place where I can hook that in and try it out, I'll just dive in there.
Nice. So have you found anything that's going to maybe either make your life much easier or something that you can do now that you couldn't do before?
So a lot of it, actually, the thing that's going to make my life easier and allow me to do more than anything else is the fact that iOS 14 supports all the same devices as iOS 13. Because I still haven't left iOS 12. I have one big update left. And then once I do that, I was going to jump over to 13. But I might do a 13 build, but I'll probably pretty quickly be able to jump on 14 since it supports so many, or the same devices as 13. And what has me really excited is the new UI collection view stuff and the diffable data source stuff. Yeah. I haven't been able to play with that at all, but I've watched the sessions on it and I watched some of the new ones and it looks fantastic. It looks like it really is like a replacement for UI table view now.
Yeah, that's what kind of was shocking to me is I knew about that feature and was excited about it in general, but really hadn't done a lot of looking at it from last year. And then with all the I think the sort of quality of life improvements they've made to different data sources, and then adding on this pretty much full-blown replacement of table view with collection view, it's just it's stunning. I actually can't wait to play with it and see what how powerful it is. I downloaded the I forget what it's called, but it's something like working with collection views, something to that effect. Example project, and it kind of just has this huge grab bag of all these different things you can do. And I guess it's a carryover from last year, but they added a bunch of extra screens to it as well to play with the new list capability and stuff. And it looks like you could actually create an app, the main page of the App Store where you've got a collection of bigger cards and smaller cards and cards that have lists in them and that kind of thing. It looks like you can actually pretty easily now just wire that all together with different sections. Some can be horizontal, some can be vertical, some can be list style, some can be card style. It's really, really exciting how powerful it is with what looks like pretty little code.
Yeah, and the collapsible stuff in particular.
Yeah,
that perfectly maps to my interface and some other stuff that I've done, in Jobby Job world.
Yeah.
And so that has me really excited because there's been a couple times I've thought about or sort of dove into building one of those myself, and it's always you don't want to get too crazy customizing table view too much. And so I'm really excited to dive into that. That is what's going to push me into iOS 14 more than anything is if I can rehash my sort of complicated multi-section table views into collapsible UI collection views. I think that's going to be really nice.
Right. And I saw too when you tweeted this week about how you were right on the cusp of having you had some color pickers and other things that you were building for Dark Noise, and you're I can just throw all that away and replace it with the
I didn't even mention controls. That. The color picker is fantastic. The way that they did that is awesome. And I literally did. I had a button that was a little the little color wheel, and when you tapped it, my not very good, but gets you there hack for now was it pops up an alert view where you can paste in a hex code.
A hex code,
And now I literally could just replace the delegate with this new one. And it already was spitting out a UI color, which is what the new UI color picker delegate hands you.
Nice.
And so I mean, it took basically zero work at all, and it looks great. It gives me everything I needed.
Right.
I'm really excited about that.
And if more people adopt it, it'll be something that you don't have to teach your users how to use, right? Because it's going to be a standard
Mhm.
control that everyone will use. So anytime you can kind of piggyback on the learning that your users have already done previously, right, to use your app, just the much better off you'll be because you're like, here, it's the same thing you already know how to use. Just pick a color.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I
As a
love,
user, I'm excited just because
yeah,
I feel like color pickers are kind of complicated, not even just to make, but for users
mm-hmm.
to build one yourself. And so everybody
Right,
kind of ends up doing what like Shortcuts does, where you
uh
get
huh,
kind of a section of colors that they pre-picked
right,
for you.
right.
And I like the idea that now you'll always have an option to just completely pick your own,
Mm-hmm.
which is really cool.
And surprising that they added a dropper that you can actually use, like the dropper tool, to
Yeah,
just
I
like
didn't see
pick any
that.
color you want.
It's weird how I feel like we've been trained to think iOS, you can't do XYZ. Like
Right.
in my head, a color picker, like, oh, you can't do that because, there's all these layers of protection between apps. But I forget, like the whole accessibility system is built as a layer on top of everything else, right? So
Mm-hmm.
obviously they have access to everything on the screen at the OS level. It's just,
Right.
I feel like we've been trained to think that that's not a thing that you can do, but forget that
Right.
the OS can.
Yeah. Yeah. And those hundreds of Cocoa Pods that exist of color pickers people have built are all just like in
Yeah,
one fell
yeah.
swoop gone.
But those would only be able to work within your app, right?
The pods?
Or could they see outside, like, if you're in split view or something?
Um, I would imagine they're going to be sandboxed like anything else, right? They're not going to be
Right.
able to reach out. So like the color picker having the ability to have that sort of little like set of swatches of your favorite colors that will persist across apps
Yeah, that's cool
is also
too.
really cool too. Like especially as if you were like a creative or something and you wanted to pick some colors in one app and then bring them into another app to use them, you can easily do that now because you can just save them to that little set of swatches and then move into the other one.
I didn't look at what APIs are available for that, but like there's kind of a whole suite of color apps that I feel like
Mm-hmm.
in the last, I don't know, 6 months have gotten really popular. There's been a bunch.
Yeah.
And I wonder
Yes.
if they would be able to like push one of their palettes that they make into that color swatch.
Potentially. That'd be
That would
cool.
that'd be interesting because then you could do that, and then inside of
Mm-hmm.
any app you could easily pick from those.
Right. Yeah. So that really wouldn't necessarily obviate their need to exist. They could still be useful.
Right.
Palette creation. In fact, I think Steve Troughton Smith recently made, I think it's called Palettes, and basically a way
Yeah.
to do that, and essentially got Sherlocked by that. But that is the risk that you run, right? As an as an Apple developer, is
Well,
Apple
and
might come
he
along.
he always said too, like his goal was to push this concept so that
Right.
everybody would specifically to implement the drag and drop colors thing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, but he's always said he wished that they would bring a color well to UIKit, and so he
Right.
was like elated. He was like, I thought
Yeah.
this was going to be farther away than this. So
Right.
I don't think he was super upset.
And how excited are you to finally have a calendar based date picker standard as
Oh
a
yeah.
control? Oh man, I can't believe we've it has been what 12 years or thereabouts before we finally got a calendar view based date picker that is standard to the OS.
Yeah,
Crazy.
that's gonna be awesome.
I really like the interaction too. It looks like it's going to be really easy to use as a user. I don't think it's going to be. Doesn't look like it's going to cause really confusion because that's
Seems
always
very
the
keyboard friendly still.
yeah, and very similar to the Mac. For like I thought it was interesting that for Big Sur they didn't really change the date picker that's in Mac OS. They just left it the same, and they then built the iOS one to look similar enough, but not identical because of course they want to support touch. So I thought that was a really cool idea of it's two flavors of the same thing basically.
Yeah, and the color picker is the same way. I as I did last year, I hit the checkbox to see what dark noise would look like on the
Mm.
Mac. And if you use
Yeah.
the new optimized for Mac version where it swaps
Mm-hmm.
out for actual AppKit stuff, the color
Mm-hmm.
picker is just the standard Mac color picker, with the grid of colors, and then you can click the
Right.
button to open the separate window. It was
Uh-huh.
kind of wild. It was like, whoa, this really is a Mac app.
Yeah. Yeah, I was watching I'm a little behind on my video, so I was watching the What's New in Swift UI talk earlier today,
Mm.
and I was really impressed by with Swift UI how easily you now will be able to do things like add entries to the menu bar menu of your Mac app with just basically like some modifiers that look like, for the most part, I mean, really, really cool. AppKit has always been something that has kind of intimidated me as someone who's, you know, an iOS developer by training, just because it's so similar and yet very different.
Yeah.
And all the idioms and stuff are very different. So I've always been a little bit weary of like trying to dig into that. But it looks like, I mean, again, I guess it shouldn't be surprising. Swift UI is becoming that unifying force that's going to bring us together and make it so that it doesn't matter what Apple platform we're talking about. If you know Swift UI, you'll be able to build an app for that sort of flavor, that specific, you know, platform, whether it be Mac OS or iOS or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah. It's one of those things where I'm getting more and more excited to finally get to dive into it. I suspect that there's going to be walls that you'll run into similar to last year, but
Right.
they're every year probably going to be chipping away at those walls, and eventually, you know, it's going to get closer to that point where
Right.
you can kind of live in that world unless you need to dive down below into
Yeah.
AppKit or UIKit.
Yeah. Yeah, I've been thinking about trying to find something to work on over the summer to just basically play with iOS 14. And I think I'm gonna probably restart work on the app that we worked on together,
Oh yeah.
and try and dig into some iOS
Ooh.
14 specific features. Revamp all of the table views to use collection view, right, so that it can be more maybe introduce layouts for card views and stuff like that. Do a widget in Swift UI, which would mean I have to rewrite the whole custom view that I built in Swift UI, which would be a fun exercise, I think. So mostly is just like a vehicle to explore the platform and explore, you know, all the stuff that we're going to get. But I'm really excited by all the stuff that we'll be able to offer. And what's cool is it seems like if I could get it launched, I could then build like a Mac version, like, you know, a menu bar or just a little floating window Mac version of it with very little work. I saw underscore David Smith recently tweeted about how he had built I think it was a map view for WatchSmith, for his watch sort of customization app. And he said that he dropped it in as a little complication on the watch, and he also used it, I think it was as a widget. And he said no changes, literally no changes. He just like copied the code into the two places that needed to exist and then ran it, and it ran in both places flawlessly with no issue. It was just stunning how much we're going to be able to leverage our work, which is so cool.
Yeah, specifically like the unification of widgets.
Yeah.
Mac widgets have, you know, they've always been there in some flavor, but
Right.
it's been a while since they've been sort of a first-class citizen. And I don't know that they'll really be a first-class citizen even now, but the difference will be they are going to be very much a first-class citizen on iOS. And
Right.
like in the little playing around with it that I've done so far, it is just verbatim exactly the same on the Mac as it is on iOS. And
That's awesome.
That's really encouraging because I think there's going to be a lot more options. I know there's going to be a lot of people complaining about them being a little bit more limited than they were with the Today extension stuff before. But honestly, like for most of the extensions, there's definitely some that were doing some more powerful stuff. But the vast majority of extensions I used were either doing deep links into apps or they were just sort of showing information like sports scores or news or whatever.
Or weather,
and
whatever it is.
Yeah, and playing around with the new ones with WidgetKit, it was so much easier to make something that looked really nice.
Right.
That I think we're going to end up with way like when people just throw a widget in there like they were doing before. I think that default version that they throw in there is going to look a lot nicer, and you might actually want it on your home screen.
Right.
Whereas before, it was especially like on the iPad where it was slightly different size, and you know, it was pretty easy to run into some that were kind of clunky, maybe at best, but they were worth it for the, you know, the information you got.
Right.
But I think Swift UI is going to help make that whole experience a lot nicer, which is going to be great as a user.
Right. And I really like the 3 sizes. I think it was cool that they went ahead and gave us some options for sizes. And how cool is it that when you preview those sizes in the little sort of preview window that you see on iOS, they're real. They're not just like boilerplate. They just render a copy of that at the right time and show you the real thing. Like, how cool is that?
Yeah, I mean, the way that they built that API, I haven't done complications. I've heard it's similar to that, but it's really clever. And
Yeah.
it is like when you start looking at it, you're like, oh, I can see how you could do this in real time, and it's not a big deal because
Right.
the whole thing is built on this pretty simple rendering model.
Mm-hmm.
And for most use cases, especially the ones I could think of anyway, it was like,
Right.
it seems like it totally fits, and it's not going
Yeah.
to have all the same battery implications that, Android widgets, at
Right.
least whenever I was still on Android, were very notorious for. I don't know if that's still the case, but
Right. So for you with dark noise, your widget so far has been like a way to sort of quick launch, right?
mhm.
A sound. For those who don't know, dark noise is a sound generator application, and he has a whole bunch of different really cool sounds in there. So like if you want to have a thunderstorm playing, you can just push a button right in your widget, and it just sort of, I'm assuming it just deep links you into the dark noise app, and then kind of
Yeah.
kicks off the thing. I saw that you were playing with that with the new widget kit stuff. I'm assuming, is it less code than it was when you sort of the traditional Today
Oh,
extension that you got?
I mean, to be fair, I built the initial widget pretty early on because I was
Right.
excited about it.
Yeah.
So I was still in early days of learning auto layout, and I didn't exactly do it in the most uh, clean way, maybe is the way to say it.
Right.
And
Right.
then I also had a couple different customization options. Like you
Mm-hmm.
could have it look different, and that was all configured in code. And so the Today extension could like push you down different paths.
Right.
Um, the new way of doing it is, one, it's super clean, especially with the new
Mm-hmm.
like grid layout stuff in
Mm-hmm.
Swift UI.
Mm-hmm.
But also, you can have as many widgets as you want.
Right.
So I can just have the different versions there always, and I can take out some of the settings in my app.
Okay. Nice.
So that was kind of like a cool realization. And
Yeah.
then the fact that the old Today extension would, I I won't say I fully understood how it was when it was allocating memory and when it was
Uh-huh.
rerunning, but it
Yeah.
seemed pretty frequent that it would just rebuild the Today extension. And so
Mm-hmm.
I kind of went with the most simple approach because that seemed to be how most of the other apps were doing, where I just assumed it could be rebuilt at any time.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was kind of weird when you change your settings and went into it. Whereas with the new approach, it's I can set mine up to say it never needs to update. There's no reason for it to ever update itself. So once it renders itself, it'll never change unless you change something in code, and then I can push a thing to say update yourself. And so
Right.
it's actually going to be, I think, a lot smoother. You'll never see it load or anything like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I
Not that
guess
it took a
because of,
long time before, but it would
right.
sometimes blink.
Right. But I guess because of the way with the timeline and the snapshot that it's taking and stuff, it's basically ready to go before you even look at it, right? It's figured out what it needs to display pretty much immediately,
Right.
and can
Well,
do
and
that.
you can tell it how often to reload, and you can also say
Okay.
just never do it.
So if it's like truly static content that you're like, this never is going to change, you can just say,
Exactly.
just render it once, and it's the same render every time.
And then, like, if you're
Interesting.
a calendar app, like the way they did it's really cool. You basically provide all of the views in that timeline
Mm-hmm.
all at once.
Mm-hmm.
And so it actually, I don't know if it pre-renders it or what it's doing, but it has all the information for every hour of the day.
Right.
And unless you change it in the app, in which case it'll rebuild everything.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of like static at that point, which is kind of
Right.
wild.
Yeah. Definitely a very different kind of paradigm for those particular things versus really what is more like the heavy-handed Today extension, which is almost like a tiny application, right? That has to run and maybe even rerun whenever it needs to render a new view. This looks like it's really harnessing the power of value type based, struct based views that can render super super fast, like with Swift UI. And in fact, I think it's true that you have to use Swift UI to make a widget, right? Is that the case?
Yeah. It's completely, it is a Swift UI framework, and like that's it.
Right.
I don't know if you can drop down into UI representable. Is that what it is? To drop
UI
in the UI
representable.
kit?
Yeah.
I don't know if that's a thing.
If it's not,
I
that's
didn't try.
an interesting kind of precursor to potentially more APIs next year that will be like, nope, this is Swift UI only. If you want to use it, you have to. It's kind of gently sort of pushing us into a world that is more dominated by Swift UI, which I think is probably going to be a good thing in the long run.
Yeah, it's interesting. I used to like last year. I always thought of Swift UI as like the new Swift, and UI Kit was kind of the old Objective C.
Uh-huh.
But it kind of feels more. I saw somebody make this comparison earlier today on Twitter, and it felt kind of apt. it
Mm-hmm.
feels like it's more like Swift UI is the new UI kit or app kit,
Mm-hmm.
and UI kit is now like what C was. Like
Yeah.
it's kind of always going to be there because
Right.
sometimes you need to drop in because you're going to need an
Mm-hmm.
imperative UI framework. And so
Right.
it was like,
Right.
oh, okay, that makes sense because Swift UI is never going to be able to get out of the fact that it's declarative. Like
Right.
if you want to do frame by frame animations or something, you need something to drop into, or else it's like the web, which I
Right.
don't think we actually want.
No, I I certainly don't want that. I don't know about other people, but I know.
I like the option. It's nice
Yeah.
when you're building something simple and you don't have to
Right.
write an insane amount of code to get there. But
Right. So I'm hearing in the chat that actually you cannot use UI representable in a widget. So
yeah,
that's
that doesn't surprise
confirmation.
me.
Yeah. So it is. So that in that case, it's a purely Swift UI based API with no backporting. Interesting. What would you say is your maybe your like if you're targeting like an iOS 14 update for, let's say you decide you want to go with iOS 14 for dark noise, what would be like your biggest challenge, I guess, for the summer to tackle?
Let's see. I actually have my Trello board sitting right here with
Nice.
iOS 14 stuff. Uh, so I mean, I guess the biggest challenge would probably be switching all of my UI table views over to UI
Uh,
collection view.
yep.
Uh, in my head right now, that's not a challenge. It's really exciting, but I'm sure once
Right.
I get into it, I'll be angry at myself.
Right.
Um, but something there's no way I'm gonna be able to have time to get to this. But one thing that would be cool is if I could get into the new like 3D audio stuff with the
Mm-hmm.
AirPods,
Yeah.
because it sounds like it's as easy as providing 5.1
Mm-hmm.
audio.
Yeah.
And so that's something I definitely could do. It's really more of a matter of do I want my file size to balloon that big?
Right.
And
Right.
so there's a whole big set of less interesting work I would need to do to make that make sense. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but yeah, so probably the UI collection view stuff.
Okay. Are your audio files embedded in your binary, or do you download them once the app gets installed?
Right now, they're all embedded in the binary.
Okay.
Yeah, because my whole shtick early on was I want this to be the most like straightforward. Like you download
Mm-hmm.
the app, you see a giant play button, and if you never
Right.
looked at anything else, you could still play white noise.
Right.
Um, and so the long term goal is like you can have higher quality audio that you
Right.
download and more options. But
Right.
until I get the whole server side infrastructure, or probably
Mm-hmm.
CloudKit is what I might use.
Yeah.
Um, until then, I'm very careful about adding sounds or doing anything that's a big file size because you
Right.
can't really take it away, and
Right.
I don't want that app size to just get way out of control. It's
Yeah.
not too bad right now.
Nice. So yeah, I think the collection view stuff is really cool, but you're right. I bet you there are dragons there that we don't quite yet see, especially like if you're converting, right? There's more stuff. Are you using the different data sources now, or is it
Mm-mm.
the okay? So it would be not only converting to collection view from table view, but also from the delegate data source methods to the different data source
Right.
instead.
Yeah, and I'm doing like almost all of the like built-in UI table view stuff as far
Uh
as like
huh.
everything's draggable, but
Uh huh.
only draggable to certain sections. And so
Right.
I'm sure there's a bunch of differences in behavior that
Right.
I'll need to figure out. I doubt it'll
Right.
be that bad, uh
Right.
but yeah,
Cool.
it's a
Do
big
you,
pile of work, I guess.
yeah. Do you think that are you leaning towards going iOS 14 as your minimum target, or do you think you're gonna stick around with what you've got now?
It all depends on numbers. I mean, what
Yeah.
is the adoption rate?
Right.
13 was kind of slow on the uptick, and I
Yeah.
never dropped that. So at this point, I could definitely switch. Um, but the thing that I'm always paranoid of is because it's a white noise generator, so many people
Hmm.
use old devices,
Right.
for
Yeah.
the kids' room or whatever. And so
Yeah.
I've always thought that was going to be a big use case, but
Hmm.
by now almost nobody is on 12 still. So which kind of
Interesting.
surprised me.
Yeah.
So
Because
we'll see how 14 adoption is.
you think, especially with the propensity of people to use older devices, that they would be on an older OS. I saw Christian Selig who makes Apollo, which is a popular Reddit client. He said that I think it was like 98.5 or something percent of his users are on 13, which for a
That's
Reddit client,
similar
probably
to mine.
skews more a little bit towards the techie kind of crowd, but not necessarily. And he said, in fact, that this was, I think, yesterday, or maybe even the day before, that already, even though 14 is just a developer beta, isn't even live as a public beta, he already has more people running Apollo on iOS 14 than there are people running the oldest or the newest version of iOS 12. So I thought that was funny that
Yeah,
that
I saw that. I saw a relatively like big app because I do think indie apps are probably more likely to be
yeah,
a
true.
higher percentage of early adopters.
Yeah, true.
But I wish I could remember who it was. But yeah, I saw somebody else saying that they had more iOS 14 users already than iOS 12 users full stop, which
Wow.
that surprised me. I
That
don't
is,
remember what
yeah.
the app was. Maybe they had a reason why more people would be on it. But
Right. Yeah, so I mean, I guess that's a good sign. And again, I've done enough betas to know that this isn't necessarily the only sign, but it's nice that iOS 14 and Big Sur and all of the different betas are seemingly pretty stable from all the reports I've heard. I've got it on only on my iPad. I didn't put it on my daily carry phone, but on the iPad it seems fine. There's a few things like the widgets are a little bit wonky. They tend to
yeah,
not stay in place all the time. And
some of the
then
preview areas of
yeah,
iOS, they are like stretched weird. Like
uh-huh.
I bet there's some like crusty parts of iOS that have assumed the home screen was this one thing for
Yeah,
a decade.
right,
That
right.
that information didn't make it all the way around Apple campus, and
Yeah,
so
to every team, right?
yeah, they're all like, "Oh no,
Wait, you changed the home screen? What
yeah,
did you do?
can we do that?"
We actually have a question here that says, "Are the widgets supported are supposed to be able to stick on the homepage? I couldn't get them to do that on mine." You want to answer that one?
So on the phone, yes. On the iPad, not now, and that's not seemingly not a bug. It seems like that is how iOS 14 is going to
Right.
ship.
Yeah, which seems like a mistake to me. Because I installed the beta and I immediately tried to drag a widget onto the home screen and then I couldn't. And I thought like, oh, it's broken. It's broken in the first beta. And then I found out no, that's a design choice that they're. And I didn't really understand what the distinction that was there. Like I guess maybe because you can make it so that the today view kind of sticks on your home screen. Maybe like, well, that's good enough. Like that's where all the widgets go, right? But I mean, if it's important enough to put them on the home screen of your iPhone, why wouldn't I also want that functionality on my iPad?
My theory, well, I think they're probably going to eventually get there. My theory for why they haven't
Yeah.
yet is because all those sizes are like static sizes. On the Mac, on
Right.
the iPad, on the phone, they're like exactly the same. I think like pixel for
Mm-hmm.
pixel, the same size.
Mm-hmm.
And on the iPad, because the icons are more spread out,
Right.
and depending on if you have it pinned or not, they're spaced differently.
Yeah.
I'm guessing that's like they couldn't make it line up so it looked right.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I don't know if eventually we'll get like, oh, your widgets need to uh, deal with different sizes better or
Mm-hmm.
something in the future, or if it
Yeah.
was just that they didn't have time to like fully get the iPad version implemented, and
Right.
so it's kind of like, okay, we'll slap it in here where it's a fixed width, and
Right.
then next version we'll get it on the iPad. But
Yeah.
hopefully that comes soon because that is definitely annoying.
Yeah. That makes sense though. That they, especially considering that Apple is so fastidious about wanting everything to look just so, right?
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
it makes sense that they'd be like, nope, not good enough. We're not gonna release it. There's another question from Michael in the chat. He asks, are they interactive at all, or are they basically just read only from app data? And as far as I know, they're the only interaction, right, is just tap regions. You can have. It sounds like one for the smallest one, and I think it was. Is it two for the medium size, and then maybe three for the big one? Or I wasn't sure on the distinction
So
there.
I haven't exercised to figure out how many are necessarily possible, but
Right.
for sure on the smallest size, which is like four app icons
Icons.
big,
Right. Yeah.
that is just one big tap target. Like there is no, inside tap targets that you can have. And then for
Mm-hmm.
the next two, it's just a decoration on a view in Swift UI.
Okay.
There's a new like link decoration or
Mm-hmm.
function. I don't know, extension. I don't remember what those are called. And for widgets, there's one called widget link, and you just provided
Okay.
a URL,
Oh, nice.
which it sounds like you can. I saw somebody mention this on Twitter, but I haven't experimented with it yet. But since it is just a URL, you can presumably link to other apps or even shortcuts if you wanted to. And so there might be some interesting hacks that can be
Yeah, that's
figured out from
interesting.
there. But
Yeah.
ultimately, it's just a deep link into the app.
Right.
So the big like gotcha is like pcalc can't have a
Mm-hmm.
calculator in the widget, and
Right.
then productivity apps like Timery, where like you tap a button
Mm-hmm.
and you start a timer and you kind of see things
Mm-hmm.
change in the widget. That is
Yeah.
a no. The widget's pretty much totally
Right.
static.
Right. Interesting. So does that also mean that the sort of old way of doing widgets, the today extensions, are they going to be replaced in iOS 14 with these new things, or can they coexist? Do you know?
So I haven't read the docs explicitly for this, but my
Uh-huh.
understanding is they're deprecated for now, but
Okay.
they're still there. So even new deployments can have them. But I can show you what they look like. Actually, okay, I can confirm because my old widget's still there. So you can have both side by side, at least in this beta.
Okay.
But this is probably a terrible idea. But they look pretty bad because they're a different width. So that
Oh
bottom
yeah,
one
you can see. Right.
is my old widget, and then
Right.
the top one is one of the new ones. And so
Right.
I think they're all pushed to the bottom. There
Okay.
is no like edit button to reorder them. Actually, if I have more than one, I don't know how I would even reorder it. You might not be able to. Um, my guess is that it's there as a stopgap, you
Right.
know, so that apps that haven't updated will still show up, and then that'll go
Right.
away probably pretty quickly.
Yeah, I wouldn't even be surprised if Apple made something like, okay, from this date on, apps cannot submit any new app extensions or anything for that.
Yeah,
You got to switch over. Interesting. That seems very sort of fitting with Apple's general MO. Like, we're not going to just delete them, but we we are going to make it so that you kind of have to transition over.
right.
Cool. Well, thank you so much, Charlie, for being on the show. I really appreciate you coming on and hanging out and chatting about everything WWDC. We want to keep these kind of short because there's just so much going on this week.
Yeah.
But I really appreciate it, and I'm sure the viewers also enjoy. And we'll